The first time I met my wife, Emily, she laughed at one of my terrible jokes before anyone else even smiled. We were at a friend's backyard barbecue, surrounded by strangers pretending to enjoy overcooked burgers. That laugh made me feel seen, and within a year, we were married. For 7 years, I believed I had built the kind of marriage people secretly envied. We bought a modest house, adopted an energetic golden retriever named Max, and spent weekends visiting my parents for family dinners. If someone had asked me then whether I trusted my wife, I would have answered without hesitation. I trusted her more than I trusted myself. Looking back now, I realize betrayal never announces itself. It quietly moves into your life disguised as ordinary moments. My cousin Ryan had always been part of every family gathering. Growing up, he was like the brother I never had. We played baseball together, survived strict grandparents together, and even stood beside each other as best men at our weddings. Everyone described Ryan as charming, dependable, and impossible not to like. Emily got along with him immediately, which never bothered me because our entire family was close. At birthdays, holidays, and summer cookouts, they joked around like siblings. My mother often smiled and said how lucky she felt that everyone genuinely enjoyed spending time together. I smiled too, never realizing that the people I trusted most were slowly creating a secret that would eventually destroy everything I believed about loyalty. The changes were so small that I ignored every warning sign. Emily suddenly became protective of her phone, taking it everywhere, even into the shower. Ryan started skipping family events whenever I confirmed I would attend. Yet somehow Emily always seemed unusually distracted whenever he wasn't around. She claimed work had become stressful, and I accepted the explanation because marriage requires trust. Whenever doubt crossed my mind, I convinced myself I was being insecure. After all, Ryan was family. Emily was my wife. The idea that the two people closest to me could betray me together seemed too cruel to even imagine. Sometimes the biggest lies survive because they're simply too painful for us to believe. Everything changed because of an accident neither of them expected. One Saturday afternoon, Emily left her smartwatch charging on the kitchen counter while rushing out to buy groceries. She had connected it to receive messages even when her phone wasn't nearby. As I walked past, the screen lit up a notification. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I only glanced because I assumed it might be important. Instead, I froze. The message read, "Last night was worth every risk. I can't stop thinking about you." My stomach dropped before I even saw the sender's name. It wasn't hidden behind a nickname or initials. It simply said, Ryan. In that single moment, the comfortable life I had spent years building shattered into pieces. I wanted to believe there had to be another explanation. Maybe Ryan had borrowed someone else's watch. Maybe it was a joke taken completely out of context. Desperate for anything that would prove I was wrong, I waited until Emily returned home. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and unpacked groceries as though nothing had happened. Watching her casually hum while placing vegetables into the refrigerator hurt more than the message itself. I didn't confront her immediately because I needed certainty, not excuses. That evening, while she slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every family gathering, every moment where I might have unknowingly witnessed the beginning of their affair. Over the next week, the truth became impossible to deny. Emily suddenly volunteered for errands she had never wanted to run before. Ryan conveniently appeared unavailable whenever I suggested we grab lunch together. One afternoon, I quietly followed Emily after she claimed she was meeting a co-worker for coffee. Instead, I watched from across the street as Ryan climbed into her car. They embraced like two people who had forgotten the rest of the world existed. They laughed together, held hands, and drove away without noticing me. I didn't chase them. I didn't yell. I simply sat behind my steering wheel with tears running down my face, realizing that sometimes silence hurts far more than anger ever could. That night, I finally understood something that changed the way I looked at betrayal forever. Affairs aren't only about broken promises between spouses. They destroy entire families. Every holiday memory suddenly became suspicious. Every shared vacation photo felt fake. Every birthday celebration now carried the possibility that they had been lying to my face while smiling for camera. I wanted revenge. I imagined exposing them immediately during Sunday dinner, throwing photographs across the table, and watching everyone react. But another thought slowly replaced my anger. If I acted emotionally, they would paint me as the unstable husband who overreacted. If I stayed patient, they would have nowhere left to hide when the truth finally surfaced. So I became the calmest version of myself anyone had ever seen. I smiled during family dinners. I answered Ryan's messages politely. I kissed Emily goodbye every morning before work as though nothing had changed. Inside, however, I was quietly preparing to end my marriage on my own terms. I met with an attorney, gathered financial records, copied important documents, and protected every account we shared. I refused to let my future be destroyed by two people who had already decided my trust meant nothing. They believed they were controlling the story. They had no idea I was writing the final chapter, and when the time came, it wouldn't just end my marriage. It would leave my entire family speechless. The opportunity came 2 weeks later when my parents announced a family reunion to celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary. Nearly everyone would be there: my siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and lifelong family friends. Emily enthusiastically offered to help organize the event, while Ryan volunteered to handle the music and decorations. Watching them coordinate plans through the family group chat almost made me laugh. They had grown so comfortable with their deception that they no longer worried about appearing suspicious. Meanwhile, every legal document I needed had already been signed. The divorce papers sat inside a sealed envelope in my office, and every piece of evidence was backed up in multiple places. I wasn't planning a scene fueled by rage. I was preparing a moment where the truth would speak louder than I ever could. The celebration began like every family gathering before it. My mother greeted everyone with hugs. Children ran to the backyard chasing each other, and my father proudly toasted 40 years of marriage. Emily stood beside me smiling for photographs, while Ryan joked with relatives near the barbecue grill. Looking around, I realized how much I stood to lose if I handled this recklessly. These weren't just witnesses. They were the people I'd spent my entire life loving. I refused to let lies define me. When dinner ended and everyone gathered for dessert, I quietly stood up, tapped my glass with a spoon, and thanked everyone for coming. The backyard slowly fell silent as dozens of familiar faces turned toward me. I've spent weeks deciding whether to say this. I began calmly. Family is supposed to be built on trust. Unfortunately, I've learned that trust means different things to different people. Emily glanced at me with a puzzled smile that quickly faded. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I continued without raising my voice. I explained that my marriage was ending, not because of growing apart, but because of betrayal involving someone sitting among us. Gasps spread to the crowd. Before either of them could interrupt, I placed printed screenshots of messages, dated photographs, and timelines on the table for everyone to see. I said nothing more. The evidence spoke for itself. Emily's face turned pale within seconds. Ryan immediately tried to claim the messages were misunderstood, insisting there had been an innocent explanation. But every excuse collapsed under the weight of the facts. My aunt covered her mouth in disbelief. My father slowly lowered his head, unable to look at either of them. My mother began crying quietly, not because of embarrassment, but because she realized two people she loved had shattered the family's trust. No one yelled. No one applauded. The silence was devastating. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation Emily and Ryan expected. It was far worse. They were forced to watch every member of our family process the truth in complete disbelief. Emily finally reached for my hand, tears filling her eyes. "Please, we can fix this," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, I looked directly into her eyes without feeling anger. I only felt exhaustion. "You had countless chances to fix this before today," I replied. "Every day you chose another lie instead." I handed her the envelope containing the divorce papers. She stared at it as though it weighed 100 pounds. Ryan attempted to apologize, saying he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. I stopped him before he could continue. "The mistake wasn't falling for someone," I said. "The mistake was believing I would never learn the truth." The weeks that followed were difficult, but strangely peaceful. Emily moved out of our home without another argument. The divorce process remained civil because every financial decision had already been organized before the confrontation. Ryan found himself isolated from much of the family. Invitations stopped arriving. Phone calls became less frequent. Relationships built over decades couldn't survive a betrayal that deep. Some relatives eventually forgave him, while others never spoke to him again. I never asked anyone to choose sides. That decision belonged to them. I simply stepped away from the chaos and focused on rebuilding a life that no longer depended on people who had proven they couldn't be trusted. Recovery wasn't immediate. There were mornings when I still reached across the bed, expecting someone to be there. There were holidays that felt strangely quiet and family traditions that now carried painful memories. Therapy helped me understand that betrayal changes your view of people, but it doesn't have to destroy your ability to trust forever. I threw myself into work, started traveling on weekends, and reconnected with friends I'd unintentionally neglected during my marriage. Little by little, I stopped asking why it had happened and started asking what kind of future I wanted to create. That simple shift changed everything. Nearly a year later, I returned to the same park where Emily and I had shared our first date. I expected sadness, but instead I felt gratitude, not for the betrayal itself, but for the lesson hidden inside it. I realized I had spent years believing loyalty meant ignoring warning signs to keep the peace. Real loyalty begins with respecting yourself enough to walk away when someone repeatedly chooses deception over honesty. As I watched families laughing in the distance, I understood that my life hadn't ended the day my marriage collapsed. It had quietly begun again the moment I chose self-respect over revenge. People occasionally ask whether exposing the affair at the family gathering was worth it. My answer always surprises them. The gathering wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about ending months of lies with undeniable truth. Secrets thrive in darkness, but honesty forces everyone to face reality, even when it's uncomfortable. I never celebrated the collapse of my marriage. I mourned it, but I also refused to carry the burden of protecting people who never protected me. In the end, the one thing that left my entire family speechless wasn't my anger or my revenge. It was the calm certainty with which I walked away, closed the door on a painful chapter, and never looked back again.